Residents in one Beijing village ordered to undergo virus testing. Now they're not allowed to leave their homes, but authorities don't seem to be reporting the situation. A rare strain of bird flu has infected a human for the first time ever. Called the H10N3 virus, the unique form of avian influenza has sickened a man in China. Severe flooding drenches part of southern China. The overflow submerged roads and cars there, while a bride and groom are spotted on a raft sailing the flooded streets. Two China-born members of New Zealand's parliament resigned last year with curiously close timing. Now, local media is reporting that it's because of their ties to the Chinese regime. And a new British aircraft carrier is set to cross through the South China Sea. The move shows that the Post-Brexit UK is eager to see Communist China respect international rules. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Chinese authorities are reportedly covering up the latest pandemic situation in a Beijing district. On Monday, a Beijing local told NTD that authorities are ordering all residents in a village in northern Beijing to undergo virus testing, and no one is allowed to leave. The Beijing Institute for Performing Arts is located there. All students there are to get tested as well and are not allowed to leave their dorms. But authorities did not appear to announce this publicly. Locals there can be seen lining up at a testing site at 3 a.m. in the morning. Also in the village is a campus of Beijing Union University. The Beijing local told NTD that many students from there are being quarantined, but school authorities in the district have not told outsiders about it. The local says he saw Chinese police sealing off main roads in the village and near Union University. All eyes in China seem to be on Guangdong province and its escalating pandemic situation. As of June 1st, 13 new cases of the CCP virus or coronavirus were found province-wide. The youngest is an asymptomatic 7-year-old girl. That's according to China's official figures, data we can't verify independently. On Monday, Guangdong officials admitted that the local patients are infected with a strain of the virus first found in India. According to British government agency Public Health England, the mutant variant is known to be highly contagious and likely more transmissible. Strong control measures have been taken in Guangdong's capital city, Guangzhou. Travel restrictions went into effect starting Monday at 10 p.m. Anyone seeking to leave the city must show negative test results from within 72 hours of their departure. A newspaper reporter visited local test centers and found many centers are already fully booked, leaving travelers to search for availability at farther locations in order to meet the requirement. Discussions about fleeing Guangzhou have become popular in recent days, alongside with pictures of crowded local highways and packed train stations. Guangzhou's neighboring city, Foshan, is also planning a partial lockdown starting Wednesday. There, people will only be able to leave the city if their official health QR code shows green, meaning clean bill of health. The codes are used across China as part of contact tracing. Alternatively, those who want to leave can also show a valid negative test result. Many areas in the city are applying their strictest prevention measures and are putting residents on lockdown inside their homes. Other communities are restricting gatherings and the use of public areas. A group of patients in China are struggling with symptoms of the CCP virus, but they can't get treatment for the sickness because of testing negative for the infection.
Posts on Chinese social media suggest many are suffering from apparent CCP virus symptoms. Those include fever, coughing, fatigue, diarrhea, chest tightness, and muscle disease. Despite their symptoms, they're being blocked from getting treatment. That's because their test results show that they're virus-free.
My body is so uncomfortable. Why can't I go to the hospital for treatment? It's painful at home. The pain is driving me to despair.
Lee asked to stay anonymous, so we gave him a pseudonym. He says he used to work for a company in China's coast in Haikou City. Last January, he first noticed a sore throat and soon developed a fever. Injections and medicines seemed to have no effect. Lee says he's been also suffering from joint pain since last March. He explained that the pain prevents him from climbing up and down stairs. To fund his medical care, Lee says he sold his home last June. He's spent over $60,000 on treatment so far. His wife has also fallen ill, and both are now out of work. Lee says he wants to be diagnosed with CCP virus so he can receive specific treatments. But that plan hasn't panned out. After Lee began noticing his medical condition, he got tested for CCP virus at least twice.
I won't get the results until the next day. Again, the results showed that my condition was normal on the following day.
Lee says local authorities turned a blind eye to his family's predicament after he described his and his wife's illnesses. But their situation isn't unique. Other patients in China are facing similar issues. Many shared their experiences on Chinese social media platform WeChat. Lee says that he joined 2 chat groups on the app. Out of over 100 group members, only 1 or 2 have been diagnosed with the virus. Physicians and other health workers in China now regard these patients as having anxiety disorder. Some even suspect they're mentally ill. A nail salon worker who asked to stay anonymous said even her family now treats her as if she has a mental disorder. She described her life as so painful that she doesn't want to live anymore.
A new virus has emerged in China. A man there could now be the first person to contract the H10N3 bird flu. NTD's Allison Lee has the details.
Chinese health authorities announced Tuesday they diagnosed a 41-year-old man with the H10N3 strain of bird flu last week. They said no other cases of human infection have ever been reported anywhere else in the world. The patient started to develop a fever and other symptoms on April 23rd and was hospitalized April 28th. But authorities didn't identify the virus as the H10N3 bird flu until May 28th. Chinese authorities didn't explain how the man got the virus, but said he is in stable condition and ready to be discharged from the hospital. It's not clear if he worked with poultry. Beijing also claimed that the risk of the virus spreading on a large scale is very low. An animal disease specialist at the UN Food and Agricultural Organization says this strain is not very common. Only 160 cases of it were reported from 1978 to 2018, mostly in wild birds in Asia. There aren't any cases detected in chickens yet. The last major outbreak of bird flu among humans was in 2016 and 2017. The H10N3 strain killed around 300 people in China. Allison Lee, NTD News.
China's flood season continues full steam ahead. Many regions in South China's Guangdong province are experiencing heavy rainfall. Entire city blocks can be seen flooded. Flood levels in areas reached many feet. Cars are almost entirely submerged in water. But it seems some residents are prepared. Online footage shows locals using rafts and canoes to travel on flooded streets. The flood has thrown a wrench into local development projects as well. It has also barged into local businesses and homes, but it's unclear how much in damage the flood has caused in total. Stock values of China's 10 major tech companies have plunged nearly $1 trillion over the past few months. This as investors become increasingly worried about the Chinese regime's crackdowns on the sector. Japanese media Nikkei Asia reports that the combined market value of 10 major Chinese IT and high-tech companies has fallen over $800 billion. This is nearly a 30% plunge compared to its peak in February. These companies include top players, such as Jack Ma's Alibaba and the developer of WeChat messaging app Tencent. Recently, the Chinese regime has been increasing its scrutiny on tech companies. It is usually accompanied by millions of dollars in fines. Last month, China's central bank warned 13 internet companies against monopolistic practices. That's after Chinese regulators fined Alibaba nearly $3 billion for the same reason. There might be a political motivation behind China's sweeping anti-monopoly crackdown. A former chief economist at China's fifth largest bank told Radio Free Asia that the CCP says politics above everything else. In regards to Beijing's clampdown on Alibaba, he says it has to do with a concern that Jack Ma could be a threat to CCP rule. The former economist explains Alibaba has become powerful enough to negotiate with the regime. The company controls large shares of data nationwide, and it has a huge amount of money. New Zealand media are digging into two former lawmakers' ties to the Chinese regime. The two Chinese-born parliamentarians resigned last year almost at the same time. NTD's Penny Zhou has the story.
Reporters questioned the New Zealand's Prime Minister about two Chinese-born former members of the New Zealand Parliament, but she neither confirmed nor denied the security concerns surrounding their cases. The two former lawmakers abruptly resigned within 11 days of each other last July. Two New Zealand news outlets reported last week that their resignation happened after leaders of their respective political parties received briefings from the country's intelligence agency. The agency warned them of the two lawmakers' ties to Beijing. In fact, New Zealand media have been reporting on the two's ties to China for years, and they raised concerns that the CCP has infiltrated New Zealand's parliament. In 2017, local media reported that the New Zealand Security Intelligence Service had been unofficially looking into one of the two lawmakers, Jian Yang.
Obviously, the government needs the Chinese developers, the builders, and also money.
He was from the center-right National Party. Yang said he was never a spy himself, but he admitted that he had studied and taught English at two Chinese military-run schools. That's to teach Chinese military intelligence officers how to, quote, collect information. But when he applied for New Zealand citizenship, he did not mention he was a member of the CCP, nor did he name the military school as his employers. He said that's because the so-called Chinese system told him to do so. A Chinese dissident in New Zealand said Yang was very active in the local Chinese community. He had been appearing alongside the Chinese ambassador at events celebrating the regime's anniversary. In 2019, he also arranged a meeting between the former National Party leader and the person in charge of China's secret police. He later apologized for that. The other Chinese-born lawmaker, Raymond Hoa, was a member of the left-wing Labour Party. A New Zealand professor specializing in Chinese influence said Hoa works very closely with Chinese regime's representatives in New Zealand, and he had links with the regime's United Front organizations. They refer to business and non-profit civil groups that work to push the CCP's agenda among overseas Chinese communities. New Zealand is a member of the Five Eyes Partnership, which also includes the US, the UK, Canada, and Australia. The alliances allows members to share intelligence with each other. That's why Beijing's infiltration into New Zealand has wider implications and has been causing concerns. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
New Zealand may be shifting towards a harder stance on Beijing. The country is now trying to present a united front with Australia. The two on Monday expressed concerns over the Chinese regime's aggression in Hong Kong and its human rights violations in Xinjiang. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern emphasized her country's support for Australia during a meeting with Prime Minister Scott Morrison. The neighboring countries have typically held close relations with each other, but there have been recent differences between them on how to manage relations with China, both countries' biggest trading partner. Australia's ties with China have sunk to their lowest point in decades in the past 18 months. That's after Morrison led calls for a global inquiry into the origins of the pandemic, and Australia barred Chinese military-linked tech giant Huawei from its 5G network.
You know, at no point in our discussions today did I detect any difference in our relative positions on the importance of maintaining a very strong and principled perspective on issues around trade, on issues around human rights. And you'll see that Australia and New Zealand have broadly been positioned in exactly the same place on these issues consistently. So I really push back on any suggestion that we are not taking a strong stance on these incredibly important issues.
Morrison warned against actors seeking to divide the allies.
I think as great partners, friends, allies, indeed family, there will be those far from here who would seek to divide us, and they will not succeed because, as we've stood resolutely together for the values and principles that Australians and New Zealanders have stood for and indeed fought for.
The Chinese regime's foreign ministry on Monday criticized the two Western leaders for making, quote, irresponsible remarks on China and interfering with China's domestic affairs. The Italian parliament last week voted unanimously to condemn the Chinese regime's atrocities against Uyghurs in the Xinjiang region. The regime's atrocities include illegal birth control practices, repression of religious freedom, forced labor, internment camps, arbitrary detention, and massive digital surveillance. But unlike the US and the UK, Italy goes short of using the word genocide for fear of causing political divisions. Nonetheless, the vote still enjoyed wide bipartisan support. It might be a sign that Italian lawmakers are reaching a consensus on a harsher stance on Beijing's human rights abuses, and that they are shifting Italy's decades-long pro-Beijing foreign policy. Italy is the only G7 country so far to have joined the Chinese regime's Belt and Road Initiative. Under the project, Beijing lends money to mostly developing countries, and Chinese state-owned firms go in to build railroads, bridges, or critical water or electricity infrastructure. But when the host countries can't repay the debt, they sometimes have to hand over strategically important ports or infrastructure to the Chinese regime. Because of Italy's participation in the project, the U.S. sees Italy as a European weak link to counter the Chinese regime. But things have been turning around since the pandemic. The Chinese regime's cover-up of the virus and its wolf warrior diplomacy are shifting Italians' perception of the regime. This February, Italy's new prime minister came into power. He has tried to stay united with the U.S.'s hard stance on the Chinese regime. He also mentioned the possibility of using Italy's so-called golden power rule to block China from buying up Italy's semiconductor industry. The Golden Power Law gives the Italian government power to screen foreign direct investments, most notably from China, in strategic sectors. Elsewhere in Europe, Poland's foreign minister flew to China over the weekend to meet with his Chinese counterpart. But the seemingly low-key visit takes on a special significance for China. The Chinese and Polish foreign ministers met on Saturday. Their talks came after the European Parliament recently voted to freeze discussions on the China investment agreement. Beijing has tried to restart the discussions following the move. According to Chinese media, Poland's foreign minister called the EU-China investment agreement the best option for both sides, adding Poland would make active efforts for what they call the healthy development of EU-China relations. But the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs said otherwise, making no mention of the alleged comments in its official statement. It simply said that the prospects of the EU-China cooperation were discussed. China also called on France for help. China's Minister of Commerce said he had raised the request in a video conference call during talks with the French Minister Delegate for Foreign Trade last month. Yet the request was left out of the statement issued afterwards by the French government. France's reaction didn't come as a surprise. Just a few weeks ago, the Chinese ambassador to France insulted French lawmakers and called a French researcher a small-time thug and a crazed hyena. This kind of rhetoric, sometimes known as China's wolf warrior diplomacy, is expected to soften as China continues to seek help to revive the investment agreement. A new British aircraft carrier is about to set sail on its maiden voyage. It shows that post-Brexit Britain is ready to defend Western interests and eager to see China respect international rules.
The UK's new $4.2 billion aircraft carrier is underway on its maiden voyage, an 8-month tour that will cross through the South China Sea and in doing so send a clear signal to Beijing. Fighter jets took off from the deck of the HMS Queen Elizabeth this week in the Mediterranean as part of NATO exercises. Watching the drills was NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg himself.
It sends a message of NATO's resolve and our capability and willingness to defend all allies against any threat. And it also sends a message of how NATO allies can operate together.
China claims 90% of the South China Sea, although several regional countries contest the boundaries, and the US has regularly sent warships through the area. Britain was the main battlefield ally of the US in Iraq and Afghanistan, and alongside France, the principal military power in the European Union. But its 2016 vote to leave the EU raised questions about its global role. London announced its biggest military spending increase since the Cold War late last year, partly in response to those concerns. Commodore Steve Morehouse is the vessel's captain.
Well, I think, it shows that we're a global navy and wanting to be back out there. We'll be operating with the United States, but also regional partners, Singapore, Japan, Republic of Korea, other ASEAN nations. Will not only be exercising militarily, but also supporting the government's wider objectives in the region. I mean, the economies out there are growing. It's an increasingly important part of the world. So hopefully, the aim for us is this deployment will be the first of a more persistent presence for the United Kingdom in that region.
Indonesia is responding to Beijing's growing military aggression in the region. The country's military is reportedly looking to triple its submarine fleets. Right now, Indonesia has 4 submarines, and it's looking to expand to 12. Japanese media Nikkei Asia reported the news, citing military sources. Indonesia's move comes as Beijing repeatedly sends ships into disputed waters. The Chinese regime claims almost all of the South China Sea with its so-called 9-dash line, and it cuts into a group of islands that Indonesia also claims. Chinese fishing boats and Coast Guard ships are currently operating around the disputed waters. An Indonesian think tank expert says a strong fleet of submarines can patrol the disputed areas more and might be able to prevent foreign ships from coming near the disputed islands. And that's all for today's China in Focus. But before you go, China in Focus is partnering with the Epoch Times newspaper on their new subscription-based streaming platform, Epoch TV. That's where you can watch our exclusive special reports like this one every Friday night. In them, we'll explore questions like how China lures in foreign companies to steal their technology, how the Chinese regime is actively collecting health data on people around the world, how the ancient Chinese philosophy of good governance differs from the current-day communist regime, and much more. Be sure to check out these investigative episodes by clicking on the link in the description down below. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you really want to understand what's happening with China. You can still watch our Monday to Thursday episodes for free on YouTube, NTD Cable TV, the NTD website, and the Epoch TV website. In our latest special report this past Friday, we discussed Beijing's ambition over one of the most sensitive types of data, DNA. The Chinese Communist Party is allegedly collecting DNA around the world. That is through a state-linked company offering COVID-19 testing assistance to other countries, granting it access to people's biometric data.
They are the ultimate company that shows connectivity to both the communist state as well as the military apparatus.
The company has been working with the Chinese military as Beijing looks to weaponize artificial intelligence and gene editing. And not just for domestic control, but also to further its global ambitions.
China has 2 million strong in its military, and it's trying to make them stronger through gene editing.
I hope that our actions can surpass the industrial age and allow China to lead the world for the next 100 years of development.
How far has China already gotten in building its genetic data trove, and what would its success mean for the world? We explore these questions and more in a new special report on China's DNA ambitions. Thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow.